From the secret annals of realms history come 11 never-before-published tales of valor, featuring the greatest heroes of that magical world: Drizzt Do'Urden, Aurelin Moonblade, Adon, Elminster of Shadowdale, Jander Sunstar, and many others, told by our favorite authors including Ed Greenwood, R.A. Salvatore, Douglas Niles, Troy Dinning, Christy Golden, and others. Hello and welcome to Williams Lyceum. I'm your host Liam, aka Hembar, and today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of Realms of Valor, edited by James Lowder. Realms of Valor is a 1993 anthology, edited by James Lowder, of course, and it is the first of the Forgotten Realms anthologies. Each story has an accompanying piece of artwork, which is really nice, and this is decently common in anthologies, but not super, right? These pieces are done by Ned Dameron. Clyde Caldwell did the cover, though. This shows us Greenwood, Cianson Dinning, and also some Salvatore art, which is nice to have. Yeah, well, I don't care for the Salvatore art, but fans of Drizzt might want the book just to look at the art, for example. The first story is Lord of Lowhill by Douglas Miles. Paul Doe, a halfling, exits his home in a hill like a hovel hole, of course. This is on the Moonshaes, Niles' stomping ground for his Moonshae and Druid home novels. Our Tolkien-esque hero braves the Palace of Skulls. Paul Doe is an aging halfling. He's gray of hair, Lord Mayor of Corwell. He contemplates his duties and a gift he can give to the king and queen in token of their friendship and the couple's anniversary. This is tied to the Moonshae trilogy, and by certain rules, certain characters have. It is likely best to read after those books, but I haven't read them yet, so it's fine. In fact, it released a month before the last of the Druid home trilogy, The Druid Queen. It may be best read in publication order, but I have, again, yet to read Niles' novels. The story itself involves an item found in Llywrath, I assume that's the Welsh double L there, forest, where the Castle of Skulls only appears once in a generation, around the summer solstice. This reminds me of a fane in a forest lake in the Erebus Kale books, but it's a fun trope. There is a dark character here, Ketheril. Paul Doe also has a companion, Stephanic, and there is also a wolf companion, for those who like those. This is a good Tolkien-esque changing of legend too, as the palace has a few accounts of its origin, right? And Tolkien liked this idea of how stories get muddled, right? And you have multiple versions of stories. But it's also very Tolkien-esque in just the way it goes about. It feels what a lot of people call classic fantasy. That's a misnomer, but it's cool to see Niles gets one idea of Tolkien about this changing stories, how stories change over time, and they are told in different ways by different people. And then story number 2 is Elminster at Mage Fair, which of course by Ed Greenwood, and it is a classic. We start with Storm Silverhand, who is traveling with the physically unimpressive Elminster. They have been traveling by horse for some time, the two enjoying each other's company rather than using spellcraft to teleport instantaneously. They go to a mage fair, an auspicious event that is exactly what it sounds like. This epigraph that introduces the story tells us what to expect. What's more dangerous than a mage out to rule the entire world? Why, a mage at play, of course, which is a quote from the symbol. The duo meets an arrogant mage on the road. He is sentinel to the fair and cries a challenge to Elminster. The exciting yarn only goes more into a silly romp and the campiness and immolation Greenwood is known for, and it does well, I think, with that. Storm is mostly a bystander since she is not a mage herself. Elminster enjoys the journey more than the storm, and we get her irony wryly delivered. You can imagine how dangerous but full of wonders such an event is, and Elminster desires a key that gives this story some nice twists and its plot. One Last Drink by Christy Golden is another classic, taking place in Mistledale in 892 DR, which is about 500 years before most Forgotten Realms stuff, for those unaware. This is an early story of Jander Sunstar from Vampire of the Mist, also by Christy Golden. Actually, what made Christy Golden kind of one of my favorites in some ways. I really like that novel. It starts in Forgotten Realms, but is actually a Ravenloft novel. It's about 300 years after the start of his undead life, and 200 before his time in Barovia. Our vampire Sun Elf waits in the town for his sire, Cassiar, with his friend, fellow elf Rin Oriendis, a writer of Mistledale. He is worried that his master will force him to drink blood from innocence. He uses the opportunity of somewhat powerful patrons in the Black Boar Inn to rid himself of the man who turned him into a creature of the night. This tale of darkness and hierarchy and curses and friendship. I've always liked vampires, particularly the trope of a vampire who is saddened by his or her state as one. Jander is a good one because he is a sun elf, and also worshipped Lathander, the Morning Lord, before his vampire days, so it's kind of depressing. That makes sense, right? The next story is The Bargain by Elaine Cunningham. It's a tale of Arlen Moonblade and Danilo Thane. The latter is a young Waterhavian noble, and the former is a half-elf. Both are harpers at this time. Arlen is also an assassin, and Danilo a mage, albeit a poor one. The relationship is fun, and you can explore it in Cunningham's Song and Swords novels. I've yet to read those as well, but I have heard nothing but high praise, to be honest. We'll see if that's true or not, but I have read the short stories Redemption and The Great Hunt, starring them before, but no novels. And apparently this takes place a few months prior to the novel Elf Song, which is the second of the series, so if you've read the first one, maybe read this next. It takes place in Tethir as well, as the duo are sent to warn Pasha Balak, a warlord vying for the throne, of a plot for his life. It turns out that there is a lesson for youth within the pages. Patronage by David Cook is the next story and is told in first person, which is a nice change of pace. Doesn't really happen much in Forgotten Realms. Master Koja is our narrator, and he is told by a secretary that Duke Piniago's dinner is tonight. He is a Lama, a well-known historian, and they are in Procamper sometime after the Tweegan Horde was stopped. Such events tie into the Horse Lords novel, also written by Cook. This story is a bit slower, as you can guess, where our main character is surrounded by parchment ink. It's kind of a cozy story. I guess you could probably label it cozy fantasy these days, anachronistically, but still. The next story is A Virtue by Reflection by Scott Siensen. It is set in Arabelle, and which is, of course, in Cormier, and follows Mermine law, like Siensen's novel The Night Parade. I haven't read that either, but it starts with a mugging of immersions on the streets, setting up a very dark tone. Mermine is the ruler of Arabelle, a city in the northeastern Cormier. She's expecting a delegation, but has to deal with a murder anyway. The story involves the Cat Lord, not Gord the Rogue, nor the one from the comics, another Cat Lord, because there's a lot, apparently. That's really all I have to say about it. I actually enjoy Siensen's style. Not my favorite, but not bad, and just a style. King's Tear by Mark Anthony sets us up with a necromancer in the southern portion of the Sunset Mountains, which is cool. We don't see those very often. If you played Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, that is where you do play in the Sunset Mountains. But this necromancer, Kilshara, shows herself to be cruel, and we then learn what a King's Tear is. It's a jewel said to be solidified tears of ancient kings, and they supposedly reveal what those kings loved most. Kilshara wants the Tome of Midnight and hopes to find it within the tears. Tyveris is a handyman at Everard Abbey, which gives patronage to Ogma and is named for the ancient Farseer king. Tyveris was originally a slave and then warrior in Erebor. He has recently learned to read and taken up a more peaceful life. Still, he's an outsider, and many at the Abbey worry he will give in to rage at some point. This is a story about necessity, violence, and truth, and it's a nice story about finding home and overcoming vices. I think Mark Anthony does a good job, actually, of hitting on some good themes here. It's still a rather campy tale, and you also get to see some things that you don't get to see very often in the Forgotten Realms. The next story is The Family Business by James Lowder. It's the story of a young artist, Cimber, who appeared in Lowder's Ring of Winter novel, which is one of the Harper novels. I haven't read that one either. But of course, The Ring of Winter and Artist Cimber are important in a 5th edition adventure if you've played that. Artist is with his father, Shadowhawk, who is teaching his son to be a highwayman. This is in Cormier, and Azun may come into play. It's a very interesting story of trying to please your father, though. It says a tiny amount of politicking, but is largely a story of running from assassins and, defining a young man's future. The next story is Grandfather's Toys by Gene Robb. It starts with a druid, Galvin. It involves characters from Gene Robb's Red Magic novel. Galvin is asked to search an old tower for a little girl. He finds it more challenging and dangerous than he had presumed. This is a tale of shapeshifting, saving a child, and powerlessness in doing so, of course. I actually like the one Robb novel I've read, but this wasn't very memorable in this case. The Curse of Tegea by Troy Denning is a very exciting tale, as it is about the cleric of Mishra Adon. This is the same character from the Avatar saga, Shatterdale, Tantris, Waterdeep, and the only one of the party not to attain godhood, because his companions are Kelemvor, Midnight, who would become Mishra, and Sirik. This tale is mentioned in the last Avatar novel, but it's which is because they added books 4 and 5 later, so Crucible, The Trials of Sirik the Mad, also by Troy Denning. But it's nice to actually read it. Adon, once a follower of Sune, is now high in the clergy of the Church of the Lady of Mysteries. He is joined by a young acolyte named Corrine. The village of Tegea is suffering from a curse, and this is on the edge of Cormier in the Stormhorn Mountains on the coast of the Dragonmere, though Denning mistakenly says it's in the Dragonjaw Mountains. It's a fun story dealing with church business. The curse is from an overbearing duke and affects those that displease him. This magic of his seems to have power over that of Mishra, the goddess of magic herself, so it gets pretty interesting. It's a little dark. Dark Mirror by Arya Salvatore is the final story and is, of course, a Drizzt story, unsurprisingly. After the retaking of Mithril Hall and Streams of Silver, Drizzt has been invited to Silvery Moon. It seems to be near the ending of the Halfling's Gym. It's a little confusing. On his way, he encounters an odd situation between goblins and humans from Pengallan. It is told in first person from Drist's perspective. Rico and Najheim, I think, are interesting characters and good foils for Drist. This definitely seems to have stayed with Drist, as it reminds me of some mercy he wanted to give to goblins in Sea of Swords, but has the bad character development that Salvatore is, great at. So, it also appears in the Collected Stories collection for Legend of Drist, and it's actually a very forgettable story. But maybe that's just because I try to forget Drist in general. There is an afterword by Jeff Grubb. I read this piece actually when I acquired the book a couple years ago, before I read the stories. It was here that Grubb mentions One Comes Unheralded Deserta, the first Forgotten Realms story. While it was lost at the time, it may have been later found, apparently. A decade later, it appeared in the Best of the Realms 2, the stories about Greenwood. It is a worthwhile read, but in the back rather than forward. So I guess if you don't care, it's easier to skip. So anyways, Lillian from Liam's Lyceum, bringing you some Forgotten Realms stuff. I'll catch you next time.